just want to say thank you to Jackie and Paul and everybody else that was involved in making today happen. I think it's so important for us to turn up and show that we support Israel. Okay, praise God. Just also want to thank the ambassador and the embassy for allowing us to be here. Praise the Lord. You know, I just want to say as well, I appreciate, you know, people have come from all around the country to show support for Israel. You know, I know people came from Kerry today. They drove 200 miles because they don't feel that the government is representing the views of many people in this nation. And you know, there is a small hate-filled minority, you know, that you know, hate Israel, hate the Jewish people, but I think it's important for us to know that we're here today, not because we hate, but because we love. Because the power of love always overcomes hate. And so let me start by saying that Israel is a thriving democracy that provides equal rights for all. It provides equal rights for men and women, for Jew and Christian, Muslim and atheist and everybody else in between. And I think it's so important for us to acknowledge that Israel is a democracy and Hamas is a genocidal terror organization that deliberately targets civilians. This has to be our starting point. For I would say that any nation, I would say that about any nation here in Europe, around the world. You know, we've seen a lot of righteous indignation in the Dáil and the media with regards to the recent conflict in Gaza. But you have to ask the question, why does Israel's ability to defend itself offend you? You know, there are those who want to frame this conflict as David versus Goliath. But you know what? In view of the fact that Iran is actively involved in much of the terrorism, is sponsoring it, not just in the Middle East, but also in Gaza, and have been pumping millions into sponsoring, you know, Hamas and what they're doing, you know, clearly, David, you know, Israel is David, and we all know how that went for Goliath. So I think it's wrong to frame Israel as being somehow Goliath in this. No, they're not. They are David. And you know, God is going to look after them. So 3 things I want to just touch on briefly. And I appreciate you coming here. And I really consider it an honor to be allowed to speak here today. There are 3 things we need to consider when we look at the situation in Israel. And the first one is history. You know, Edmund Burke, he was an English parliamentarian, and he said this. He was an Irishman in the English Parliament, but he said, those who don't know history are destined to repeat it. And I think it was Cicero said, to remain ignorant of history is to remain forever a child. And this is part of the problem, because unfortunately it seems our generation is determined to forget history. Okay? And much of the shallow and vindictive commentary on Israel that we see in the Dáil and the media is verging on childish in terms of grasping the daily reality on the ground for Israelis. Because it's easy to have an opinion from 5,000 kilometers away. Opinions cost nothing except for the lives of innocent Jews. But in Ireland, we are good at forgetting inconvenient truth, because it's easier to swallow the headlines and demonize Israel rather than take the time to understand the historical context that led to the re-establishment of the nation of Israel and the hostility that Jews have encountered for literally thousands of years and still face today. Okay, I think it's important for us to grasp this, because we forget that it was a European nation that facilitated by collaborators all through Europe, that rounded up and murdered 6 million European Jews. We forget that Ireland could have taken in many Jewish refugees in World War II, but we didn't. We forget that our Taoiseach at the time offered his condolences to the German embassy on the death of Hitler. I mean, what was he thinking? You know, we forget that it was right here in Europe that we saw a brutal genocide of 6 million innocent men, women and children that led to the rebirth of the state of Israel. You know, many Jews fled to Israel after the war because clearly they had nowhere else to go. Because, you know, certainly Europe was no longer safe for them. You know, many of them literally walked with nothing but the clothes on their back, and another 850,000 of them were chased out of the Arab nations that surround Israel. And yet, it's convenient to forget this, lest we be forced to draw a parallel between the rising anti-Semitic hatred we see in our generation and the final solution presented by Hitler. But no, we think that we are better, that we have evolved, that we're different. How? Because when we ignore or forget the lessons of history, we miss the warnings they give. Because the Holocaust didn't happen in a vacuum. And sadly, there are many troubling parallels with the undeniable rise that we're seeing in anti-Semitic hatred around the world. And I appreciate the Holocaust must never be used for a political purpose. And yet, can we really say that the Holocaust and the rebirth of Israel are totally unrelated events? Of course not. That being so, much of the hatred directed towards the nation of Israel is the very same hatred that led to the Holocaust. And you know, it's therefore ironic that there are those who seek to use the Holocaust to demonize the nation of Israel by drawing a parallel between the treatment of Jews in World War II and Palestinians in Gaza. You know, a TD did this very thing this week in the Dáil. This is grossly unfair as well as patently illogical to say that Israel is some kind of apartheid state simply because they won't permit Islamic terrorists to murder their citizens. I think that's frankly insane. Because let me say this, Israel have built walls and invested in technology that stops rockets and suicide bombers from killing their people, while Hamas have invested in terrorist infrastructure like tunnels and rockets, and this is reflected in the ultimate death toll when a confrontation inevitably occurs. And I say inevitably because Hamas refused to even recognize the right of Israel to exist as a nation, and therefore, and they also teach their kids that killing Jews is the ultimate accomplishment in life. And I think that is tragic. So I say yes, free Palestine from Hamas and the Islamic terrorists that rule it. And I would say that sadly, some Irish politicians have bought into the lie that the answer to peace in the Middle East is found in the isolation or even the elimination of Israel. Because it's what Iran and supporters of BDS want. They are wrong. Because Gaza is evidence of this. The Jews left Gaza in 2005, and ironically, it didn't change into the Paris of the Middle East. You know, the fact that Palestinians repurpose house pipes from Jewish settlers to create rockets is an indictment of the very different values that are at play. Because values matter. One side protects their citizens while the other callously uses them as human shields. These are very different values. You see, protection of life is a core Jewish value. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life that you and your family may live. So God even gives us the answer to the question. But, you know, this is the thing. It takes two sides to make peace. As Golda Meir once said, peace will come to the Middle East when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us. Because peace is possible, but only when you're willing to put aside hate and prejudice and acknowledge reality. And the reality is this. The Jews are the indigenous people to the nation of Israel. That's just reality. They have an undeniable connection for the last 3,300 years to the Holy Land. 3,000 years ago, David conquered Jerusalem and made it the capital of the Jewish people. And since that time, there's been a constant Jewish presence in the Holy Land, including Judea and Samaria, incidentally, where much of the Bible was written. But you see, history warns us that anti-Semitism is an irrational and ancient hatred that thrives in spite of our so-called progressive values. You know, Labour in the UK is a perfect example. If you study history and you look at the consistent pogroms and attacks on Jews in Europe, the Middle East, and around the world, but you know what? For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews can actually protect themselves in their own land. Yes. Come on. I'm a preacher, I do everything in 3 points. So, history, the second one is hysteria. Okay? Hysteria is defined as an exaggerated or uncontrollable emotion or excitement, irrationality, neurosis, panic, mania, delirium. And this generally describes the tone taken when most politicians, activists, and media outlets deal with the nation of Israel. I mean, you may say, how can you say that, Pastor, when Palestinians are dying? I understand that. Because being pro-Israel doesn't mean you're anti-Palestinian.
Yes!
But if you choose to willfully ignore the fact that in many instances the needless pain and suffering brought upon the Palestinian people is inflicted upon them by their own leaders who have turned Gaza into a de facto terrorist state, deliberately endangering their own people by firing rockets from schools and hospitals, you have to ask yourself the question, is hatred for Israel based on fact or hysteria? I believe it's based on hysteria, because the death of even one Palestinian child is tragic. But whose fault is this? Because fact and not fiction must guide our conclusions. Truth, not hysteria and propaganda. Because there's no shortage of online videos and commentary portraying Israel as an evil apartheid state. You know, the fact that I had to recently explain to an Irish lady that no, Israel doesn't harvest organs of children, and if they did, there would be no shortage of media outlets who would tell the world. But she was convinced because she had just watched a YouTube video, which everybody knows immediately makes you an expert. But you know what? I had to show her that's wrong. It doesn't happen. Another friend pointed out that Jews run the banks, the governments, and the media of the world. After all, Mark Zuckerberg is a Jew. Well, all I can say is if Jews are running the media, they're not doing a very good job in ensuring they're not criticized. Because in Ireland, we seem to have made an industry out of it. And so the fact that I had to explain that this kind of hysteria and misinformation isn't rooted in fact is a sad indication that we live in a post-truth world. I explained that it's really, in fact, no different to the medieval blood libels that said Jewish rituals involved the blood of Christian children. And you see, much of this hatred is stoked by well-meaning but poorly informed politicians and journalists. And I'm going to say well-meaning because I don't want to infer motives into anybody, but much of this hatred is stoked by poorly informed politicians and journalists calling for what essentially amounts to a Jew-free Middle East. I mean, why is ethnic cleansing suddenly acceptable because it's Israel? Because to label Jews, the desire of the Jewish people to live in their ancestral land as being somehow de facto annexation is a very dangerous and unfair allegation to make. Because what the hell gives us as Irish people the right to say that Jewish people can't live in Judea or Samaria?
Yes! That's right. That's right.
We're buying into a very dangerous lie, because the Palestinian chant, from the river to the sea, is ultimately about ethnic cleansing. And let me say this, it seems that anti-Zionism is in many instances simply a flag of convenience for expressing anti-Semitic hate in a politically correct manner. And sadly, it seems that many, I'm not a liar. I'm not a liar. And I'm going to keep speaking. You can't stop me. This is a free country. God has given me a voice, and I'm going to speak. Let me say that again. It seems to have triggered somebody. It seems anti-Zionism is in many instances a flag of convenience for expressing anti-Semitic hate in a politically correct manner. Sadly, it seems that many left fringe parties are being given a platform in the Irish media they don't deserve. A recent Irish Times article covering a pro-Palestinian rally quoted Richard Boyd Barrett calling for a South Africa-style boycott of Irish goods. But with the BDS message, the BDS message is ultimately don't buy from Jews. And I believe that's a troubling precedent that we already saw in 1930s Germany. He was quoted as saying, the people of Palestine are doing their bit, now we must do the same. But exactly what does doing their bit mean? Because we've seen over the last few weeks over 4,300 rockets fired from residential areas in Gaza towards residential areas in Israel. And that is wrong. You know, we've seen stabbings of police officers and soldiers, you know, because it's the manifestation or the culmination of the hatred that has been engendered into a people. And that's why, again, I say free Israel, free Palestine from Hamas. And so, because again, I mean, what's the problem with a few thousand rockets, right? I'm sure all the Dublin forces who talk about freeing Palestine understand what it's like to live under the sustained threat of dying or losing family and friends to rockets fired against you. And so, devil is a liar.
Yes, he is.
But anyway, that is the second thing, is hysteria. And unfortunately, we're seeing much of that hysteria manifested in our society. And the last thing I just want to say is humanity. Because, unfortunately, my iPad's after dying, but, you know, the Auschwitz Museum releases pictures every day of people that suffered and were executed in Auschwitz. And I think it's so tragic to see these little children, 3 and 4 and 5 years of age, you know, being killed simply because they were Jews. I think it is tragic, it is shameful, and it's something that we have to stand against. Because like I said, this is an ancient hatred, and we have to stand against it. We have to stand with Israel. And you know what? Because when you consider the humanity of the Jewish people, like I said, I'm a father of 5 beautiful little children, and I can't imagine what it would be like to live under that sustained rocket attack, you know, living in fear of your lives, simply because of the fact that you're Jewish. And I think that is wrong, and I think as Irish people, we have to have a more balanced perspective on the situation. Like I said, you know, this is not about hating Palestinian people. This is about simply acknowledging the humanity of the Israeli people and their right to live in their ancestral homeland. And so I just want to thank you so much. God bless you all.